Tasha. Good morning, Trinidad and Tobago.
And the Electronic Monitoring Unit is here with us this morning. We'll tell you a bit. As you know, the Electronic Monitoring Unit has been established within the Ministry of National Security with the purpose of implementing and maintaining a system for electronic monitoring in accordance with Section 6 and 2 of the Administration of Justice Act, number 11 of 2012. The system uses technology to monitor the movements of certain categories of offenders on a continuous basis via affixed ankle bracelets. The devices function using global positioning systems. Electronic monitoring is one of the major initiatives being implemented with the aim of transforming and modernizing the criminal justice landscape in Trinidad and Tobago. The electronic monitoring system is intended to contribute to the overhaul of the penal system in Trinidad and Tobago by introducing a new sentencing option to the court as an alternative to incarceration and as a condition of bail for certain charges, including domestic violence and sexual offenses. And the two gentlemen with us this morning would be the manager and his deputy, Mr. Desmond Hamilton, and Tasha will tell you more about them.
Desmond Hamilton, who is the manager of the EMU, has worked in the public service for approximately 35 years in various ministries, including the Ministry of Planning and Development, the Ministry of Works, the Ministry of Justice, and the Ministry of National Security. He holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Social Sciences and a Master's in Planning and Development, both attained at the UWI St. Augustine. His background includes land use and town planning, development planning, human resource management, and research. And we're also going to be joined by the Deputy Manager of the EMU. His name is Lawrence Hines, who is a vigilant and discreet security professional offering 28.
It's important for us to note that there was a time when we had a series of deaths related to domestic violence issues, and the restraining order, we felt, was just another piece of paper, because when somebody decides that I am not going to live without you, and if I cannot have you, nobody else can, there's nothing, a piece of paper is not going to stop them by waving it in front of them. They are going to go through with what they feel to satisfy their mind and heart. And we mentioned, I was saying, Natasha, then we need to employ electronic monitoring. And I described how it should be used and all of that. And fast forward to today, we have it. So thank God for that. And we will be hearing more about that and other ways that it will be used by these gentlemen, and which is a welcome weapon added to the arsenal of the Ministry of National Security.
And I hope that as well we'll be able to discuss with Mr. Hamilton and Mr. Hines about the legislative framework that guides this electronic monitoring and its addition to the arsenal of services, I want to say, in the criminal justice system, and some of the ethical and technological concerns that may have been considered in the implementation of this system. So we are, it's a recently established unit, so it's pretty fresh on the ground, and we are looking forward to discussing how this device can assist in protecting citizens and rehabilitating, if that's part of the goal. We'll hear that today, offenders.
All right, so without further ado, we introduce the gentlemen. Good morning, gentlemen. As we wait for them to be connected, because they're doing it via video, so we have Mr. Desmond Hamilton and Mr. Lawrence Hines. Good morning, sir.
Lawrence Hines. Good morning.
Yes, good morning. Good morning.
Good morning, we're hearing you.
Mr. and Mrs. Garth and Natasha Sinclair. Are you hearing me?
Yes, we're hearing you.
Great.
Right.
Thank you very much for this opportunity to be able to come to share information with you on both the electronic monitoring program and the electronic monitoring unit.
Right,
It's a real pleasure because we're excited about this initiative, this new initiative that has been established. And we are going to attempt to address all the matters that you would have raised there as best as we can. And this is all part of our attempt to sensitize the general public in line with what is contained in the Act as well. We have a responsibility under the Act to sensitize the general public, both our internal public and our external publics, about what electronic monitoring is about and what the electronic monitoring unit is currently doing. So quite correctly, you in your introduction, you said the electronic monitoring unit has been recently established within the Ministry of National Security with the purpose of implementing and maintaining a system of electronic monitoring in Trinidad and Tobago in accordance with sections 6.1 and 6.2 of the Administration of Justice Act number 11 of 2012. And we want to indicate that there is another act, Act 11 of 2020. Both acts have been proclaimed, and there is the regulations which have been passed as well in Parliament by negative resolution. So that is the context and the legal enabling environment in which we operate at this point in time.
All right. And I take it Mr. Hines is with us as well?
Right. And I take it Mr. Hines is well.
Mr. Hines, can you hear us? Yes,
Can you hear us? Yes, good.
What we propose to do, is that we had sent you a list of questions.
Yeah, no, yes, Mr.
So that we will
Hamilton.
go through the,
Yeah, no, I'm just
Yes.
making sure somebody's microphone is on. I don't know, because we're getting a feedback. So I'm asking, I'm not hearing from Mr. Hines.
So I'm asking, I'm not hearing from Mr. Hines.
Oh, yes. Okay, all right. Let me allow him to speak.
Mr. Hines, are you there?
Mr. Hines, are you?
All personnel to the program, so it is a pleasure to be here this morning. And I'm Hamilton. We will try to address as much as possible all questions in relation to bringing the nation of Trinidad up to date with the focus of electronic monitoring. Thank you very much.
All right. So if any of you gentlemen have a speaker on in your background, is it possible you can switch it off because it is recycling the conversation?
It is recycling the conversation.
So that will help. And thank you, Mr. Hines. Thank you very much for joining us.
Mr. Hines, thank you very much for joining us.
And we hear you loud and clear too, so that's great.
And we hear you loud and clear too, so that's great.
All right, so let's jump right into
it. Let's jump right in.
For the benefit of the public, what is an electronic monitoring system?
What is an electronic monitoring system?
We have a short video. So let's show that video first while we sort this out. But let's show that video, the GPS global monitoring system. Shortman, you could put up that video for us, please. Let the public see what is this GPS global global monitoring system, and then we will head to the first question. how the monitoring system works. So they show a suspect, well, someone who was issued. They show you actually as soon as he steps out of the home, the tracking device, of course, alerts the authorities, and they're able to follow him wherever he goes. And the police now, well, it seems as though he actually crossed the jurisdiction that he was assigned to stay in, and the police was alerted, and they tracked him to where he ended up. So this is how the system works, right? You issue it from the time you see him leaving prison here, he signs for the document, and he signs for the equipment, it's placed around his ankles, and that's supposed to keep him in a certain perimeter. Of course, Mr. Hamilton and they will elaborate on that. But he actually left home, and he's now heading. There's a picture of him heading out the yard and out his door, and apparently he ended up somewhere he was not supposed to be. And the monitor picked it up, and of course there are 3 people in a room with monitors looking at his movement, and there's a beep that's a signal that's emanating from the anchor. So wherever he goes, the police can track him, and he ends up in a house somewhere, and the police pulls up in front. This is how easy it works, right? So come back to us, Gary. And thank you very much, folks. So, Mr. Hamilton.
Yes, yes. So that video, unfortunately, the persons who were just listening could not see what was taking place, but you did describe what took place there from the beginning of the system, where the offender was placed on the program via the use of an electronic device, to the time when he deviated from the inclusion zone which was established, and he was arrested. So electronic monitoring basically is also commonly referred to as electronic tagging. It is a form of non-secret surveillance. So it is non-secret. It is not a secret surveillance. The persons who are being monitored, they are aware. Well, persons who live with them and persons in the community knows that they are being monitored, and it consists of the fitting of an electronic monitoring device, which we saw in the video, and which allows the person's whereabouts wherever the person goes. It allows his or her whereabouts to be monitored on a continuous basis. So there are no gaps in the monitoring of the person. The person is being monitored on a continuous 24/7 basis. And during the interview, we'll go into much more detail and to provide adequate level of understanding for all our listeners, both here in Trinidad and Tobago and the wider public. And at the end of the program, we hope that persons will understand exactly what is taking place. So electronic monitoring, so remember the term that is commonly used, tagging, right? Electronic monitoring, tagging, where a device is placed on the offender using electronic monitoring technology, GPS, global positioning technology. We'll go into that to monitor the individual's whereabouts at all times during the period he or she is placed on the program.
All right. So then we can go into now what is the mandate of the electronic monitoring unit?
Yes, the mandate of the electronic monitoring unit.
Before you proceed,
sure. Yes.
Is it possible? We don't know what is causing the relay, the repeat of the echo. But is it possible you can?
All right. I'm going to.
The speaker, if you have a speaker in the room that you're in.
I'm going to load on microphone. I don't know if it's the level, the microphone level. I'm not sure.
No, it's not the microphone.
We have been checking to see what might have been causing the delay. Is that any better?
You could use a headset. I'm not hearing it now.
Yes, it's still there.
It's still there?
Garth, is that any better? I have lowered down my microphone.
Yeah.
All right. Yes, that's better. Right. Much better. Right. So what is the mandate of the electronic monitoring unit?
The electronic monitoring, as you would have stated in your opening, the electronic monitoring has been established in the Ministry of National Security. Of electronic monitoring in Trinidad and Tobago. And that is in accordance with, as we said earlier, with sections 6.1 and 6.2 of the Administration of Justice Act number 11 of 2012.
Right. Could you just repeat that line again because you broke up? You broke up in the Sorry,
Mr. provided some amendments to that act. So let me outline some of the main responsibilities of the unit. Firstly, the main responsibility of the unit is to provide real-time tracking of the location of persons placed on electronic monitoring on a 24/7, 365 day basis. Another responsibility, critical responsibility, is to report alarm notifications, which you saw in the video where an alarm went off and the monitoring center was alerted and took action based on that alarm notification. So one of the key responsibilities of the electronic monitoring unit is to report alarm notifications, signal loss, and respond to device malfunctions if that occurs. You are also responsible for exercising control of all monitoring information. We are also required to maintain a register of decisions transmitted to it by the court and other competent authority and information related to the subject of any decision by the court. A key responsibility, a key mandate for the unit is to undertake the fitting, the maintenance, and removal of devices and collaborate closely with all relevant stakeholders in the criminal justice system and other stakeholders that are deemed appropriate. We are also required to provide technical assistance where necessary and to provide training where necessary. And lastly, we are also required to ensure that a historical record is maintained of all electronic monitoring spatial data, including any technical equipment necessary to read and display such information. So those are the main duties and responsibilities of the electronic monitoring unit as a unit.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Could we talk a little bit now about why such a system was necessary in Trinidad and Tobago? This is a system that has been in use in many jurisdictions across the globe, but why was it deemed necessary for Trinidad and Tobago?
Well, Trinidad and Tobago is like many other countries and jurisdictions around the world, as you just said, that are faced with significant challenges with respect to prison overcrowding, poor or substandard prison conditions, and well, that is that part of it. On the other hand, we are interested in the restorative justice aspect and the rehabilitation aspect of electronic monitoring that electronic monitoring provides, where persons can continue to live productive lives while being monitored by a state agency. So those are some of the key reasons why electronic monitoring is necessary in Trinidad and Tobago. Of course, there's an economic element as well, where electronic monitoring is much cheaper, so to speak, than having persons kept in being in prison. So it's a much cheaper option. So there are economic benefits also involved in having an electronic monitoring system. So basically, that is why we think it has been deemed necessary in Trinidad and Tobago.
Right. As you mentioned, restorative justice. How does this system work to facilitate that? Because it sounds to me as a layperson, as you mentioned, it's an alternative to incarceration, basically. But how does it contribute to restorative justice objectives?
Well, first of all, persons who are placed on electronic monitoring through the courts are usually allowed to continue to lead their normal lives. So they can work, they can attend programs, educational programs. We have persons in the program who go to school, young persons who go to school. There are persons in the program who continue working and taking care of their families. And that's on the one hand. On the other hand, there are persons who, when placed on electronic monitoring, they are not involved in the criminal environment in the prison. They are allowed to rethink, to reflect on what they may have done, and that contributes to a reduction in what we call the rate of recidivism or the rate of reoffending. They are less likely to reoffend whilst placed on electronic monitoring. So that is the restorative justice element of electronic monitoring, being placed on electronic monitoring away from the prison environment. Of course, in the prison environment, there's also the predisposition to get involved in gang activity and so on, as we all know. That is very prevalent within the halls of the nation's prisons. So if you remove them away from that environment, that reduces that element of criminality that is seen to be so attractive, particularly among the youth population of the nation.
All right, folks, if you're just joining us, as some of you have just did, we are listening to Dependency, and we are speaking with Mr. Desmond Hamilton and Mr. Lawrence Hines, Manager and Deputy of the Electronic Monitoring Unit. Again, if you missed the video that we showed at the top, we're going to show it again how this device works, and we are going through a list of questions with the gentlemen so that you will have a clear understanding of this device and what's applicable, where it's applicable. We're going to take a break. We'll be back shortly. Stay right there.
My Freedom Day. We shouldn't have to live in fear. You should be free. I should be free. We all should be free.
Finally, Welcome Relief comes in the form of a scientific-based program that shows us how to manage through the tough, current challenges. Called Habitalism. It features best-selling author on positivity and happiness, Dr. Tal Ben-Shahar, integrated with the award-winning Intangence methodology of Ross. Visit habitalism.me to register now for this free life-transforming program endorsed by the United Nations established University for Peace. Gifted by Guardian Group. Live easy.
Freedom means I can choose where I work, who I work for. I can also choose what I say and to whom. Sadly, many persons in the world do not have this freedom of speech, freedom of choice, and freedom of expression. We at the Counter-Trafficking Unit of the Ministry of National Security pledge to continue to raise awareness about human trafficking using social media among our local and migrant community in Trinidad and Tobago. Tomaremos la acción de comprometer a usar las redes sociales para crear conciencia sobre la trata de personas en Trinidad y Tobago.
Thank you for staying with us. This is Ion.
This Sunday on episode 7 of Ion Dependency, where every life is a biography.
Electronic monitoring will be one.
Finally, Welcome Relief comes in the form of a scientific-based program that shows us how to manage through the tough, current challenges. Called Habitalism. It features best-selling author on positivity and happiness, Dr. Tal Ben-Shahar, integrated with the award-winning Intangence methodology of Ross. Visit habitalism.me to register now for this free life-transforming program endorsed by the United Nations established University for Peace. Gifted by Guardian Group. Live easy.
This Sunday on episode 7 of Ion Dependency, where every life is a biography.
As Trinidad and Tobago debates the introduction of a public registry of sex offenders, how much will it help to keep people safe? And how much could it harm? This Sunday, Garth and Natasha speak with two women whose families have been negatively impacted by registries. We welcome a former Marine.
I stayed the ship here this morning.
You know what's happening.
Yeah, we have some. But folks, again, thanks for your patience. Those of you on Facebook and YouTube, thank you so much. And those of you listening on the radio, you probably want to know what's going on with our Dependency this morning. But really, as I said, sometimes these things happen. It's not, if you're accustomed to listening to us, it's not really a regular thing.
Correct.
So we will just continue to steer the ship in this water that we have going on here. The rough waters that we have here. Right, so we have on line with us Mr. Desmond Hamilton and Mr. Lawrence Hines, manager and deputy of the Electronic Monitoring Unit. And they've been answering some questions about this unit. So
I would like to ask Mr. Hamilton if he can, based on the request of our Facebook audience, if you can reiterate and elaborate a little bit more on the restorative justice aspect of the electronic monitoring systems. It wasn't quite clear what the links are and if there's any evidence or research to show that people are less likely to offend when they're being monitored electronically.
Yes, Natasha. When we were developing the policy for electronic monitoring, we considered that based on the information we were getting from the prison authorities, that there was the view. So let me just say up front that we hope to make that link in terms of we hope to get the benefits, to enjoy the benefits of the restorative elements, but that the evidence supporting like reoffending, and we know that there are different ways and different methodologies involved in evaluating recidivism and so on, right? So we will have to await the implementation, the ongoing implementation of the system to determine whether and to what extent, right, the restorative element of electronic monitoring is successful or not. All right, so what we're saying is that we hope that it would contribute to that, but basically, there's some agreement in terms of the research that that persons reoffend less if, in some cases, if they are given the opportunity to reassess what they would have done in the past. Right? That's how some persons, not all, of course, but some persons respond in that way. They reassess what they would have done in the past, and they are prepared to make a turnaround in life. It's almost like if they repent for the sin they would have committed, and they would now restore, right? Be restored to their original positions. When we're doing the director's report for the courts, which we're going to go into, and we look at what the antecedents or the character of the person who would have committed certain offenses. Many of them, there is a reason why they do it. Sometimes, poor upbringing and so on. Sometimes they were disappointed by one parent or the other or both, and that would have driven them to, and influenced by other persons, that would have driven them to commit certain offenses. But having done so, and having ended up in the prison system, once given an opportunity to be free or to be out of that prison system, even being monitored, they continue, or they change their way and continue to engage in positive, and they even influence other persons to come out from, or to turn away from the criminal behavior and criminal intent. So what we're saying is that those are the possibilities, right? Now, there's also that aspect of going back into the community, sometimes in conjunction with the probation services division. They sometimes are placed on a community service order or probation service order, and they provide community services to the community while being monitored. So that is all integral to the electronic monitoring system. So those are a couple of examples of how persons and the link between the restorative justice aspect of the electronic monitoring and persons being placed on electronic monitoring.
No, Mr. Hamilton, thank you very much for.
But this is a discussion that there are several views and so on. We really hope to monitor and evaluate all these matters as we go along.
No, Mr.
I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, Mr. Hamilton, you hearing me, right?
Yeah.
Are you hearing me?
Yes, I'm hearing you.
Right. No, but I was just about to add to what you just said, that having a monitor, I think too, for someone who has come to terms with their situation and wants to do right, they know, which includes staying within the parameters that the monitor is designed to keep you. I think it may at some point it will assist the person in realizing, look, this thing has kept me in a certain box, and I need to turn my life around if I if I need to be a normal citizen again. So I can see where it can contribute to someone restoring him or herself, and can be properly reintegrated.
Yes, you're very correct. And the electronic monitoring actually allows them to achieve a level of discipline that may have been previously absent in their lives. And that level of discipline and self-control, they're getting it from the outside help, but it is really encouraging them now to abide by a certain number of conditionalities that are placed upon them whilst being monitored.
All right, and you have a very lively discussion going on Facebook here. Thank you, folks, if you're just joining us. You're listening to Dependency, and we are speaking with Mr. Desmond Hamilton, Mr. Lawrence Hines, the both manager and deputy of the newly installed electronic monitoring unit. Now, gentlemen, before we go to how will this unit work, you had a launch in July, and we have some images from that. 2021, July 2021. And we have, here's Mr., well, both Hines, the minister, and Lawrence. He's the Minister of National Security. He's looking on as Mr. Hines Lawrence, that is, display the system to the, I guess, would have been at the press conference.
Yeah.
So we have several of the instruments with him. And the other image, we could go on to the right. These are the gentlemen here at the launch. And again, they're showing the units that will be put into action. The other image, short man. And of course, we have 3 images.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, yes. That's the other one with Mr. Lawrence Hines showing the connection with the GPS system. I guess that's it with his phone. And, of course, the video of the launch.
So let's run that.
It captures the information in terms of the longitude and latitude. The information is stored in the device in itself. There is a SIM in that device, and what that SIM does is transport that information, that longitude and latitude, through the telephone networks and bring it to the center, where we can now see that information on the screen and verify that the person is where they're supposed to be. So that is the basic concept of the GPS monitoring of an individual.
Right, and we do have another video to share, but this is a news report from the launch which gives a little more detail again, and which we will explore later on about the system and how it works. Let's go to that.
Electronic monitoring will be one of the mechanisms used in the fight against domestic violence in Trinidad and Tobago. This according to Minister of National Security Fitzgerald Hines. At the launch of the electronic monitoring system on Friday, he said this technology will be used to monitor the movements of some categories of criminals. Mahalia Joseph Wharton has more.
Minister of National Security Fitzgerald Hines said the system will protect citizens, especially women and children, from domestic violence as their offenders will be electronically monitored. He said the supply, delivery, installation and maintenance of the system for 3 years cost approximately $10.3 million with an annual staffing cost of $1.7 million. He said it's worth the cost as there are many benefits to the criminal justice system.
Over 1,000 police officers have been trained in the application of and an understanding of the electronic monitoring system, so that they will know what is expected of them, the role they have to play.
Deputy Director of the Electronic Monitoring Unit, Lawrence Hines, said criminals will be given the opportunity based on the court's decision to have electronic monitoring in place of incarceration.
So this is a one-piece device. So we take the device. In this device, there is a number of sensors built into the device, and this device is affixed to the individual ankle. Once this is closed or locked and this device has been turned on, it builds a circuit, and once there is any sort of interference anywhere throughout this device, if you try to tug at it, if you try to open it, if you try to do anything untoward to this device, the sensors will trigger.
There is a payment to utilize the device, but he said the court may decide not to charge a fee based on the circumstances and living situation of the recipient.
So we have 3 layers. So you have the victim, will normally wear it's $8 per day. You have the one piece, which will be $9 per day, base multiplied by the number of days on the program. You have the 2-piece, which is $10 per day. And if you are on home confinement, it's $11 per day multiplied by the days in question on the program.
The implementation of the electronic monitoring system will see an overhaul of the criminal justice system by introducing new sentencing options, and another benefit will be a reduced prison population. Mahalia Joseph Wharton, TTT News.
So that was a news report from after the launch of the unit in July 2021, and now we will go back to Mr. Hamilton and Mr. Hines to give us a little more about how the system actually works in Trinidad and Tobago. How does it work? Mr. Hamilton, Mr. Hines?
Mr. Hines will take over now.
Okay, good. Welcome again, Mr. Hines.
If you're just joining us, you're listening to Dependency, and if you, of course, you know what we guide you to do. If you want to see how these devices work,
Good
you
morning.
can join us on Facebook or YouTube. Dependency.
Good morning. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we're hearing you.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
All right. So wonderful. Just ensuring that there is no feedback, so
yes,
there isn't any issues while we go through the program.
Yeah, we're hearing you loud and clear. So could you tell us a little bit more and explain in a little more detail about how the system itself works?
All right, wonderful. So before we go into exactly how the system works, just let me bring you up to speed with what are the devices that we actually have in our possession.
Yeah.
So we have what we call a one-piece device. We have 150 of those. We have a two-piece, which we usually utilize for the child or under the domestic violence solution. And we have 100 of those. Additionally, we have for the home curfew or home sentencing, and we have an additional 50 pieces or 50 solutions in relation to that. So how these devices function, they are GPS-enabled devices, and they utilize the GPS positioning system in conjunction with what we call our local telecom. Our local telecom provides that transport mechanism by which the information which is captured from the GPS into the device is now layered or sent to the center for us to interpret that information and to state exactly whosoever is wearing the device that they are abiding by the order, which is the court order would have been on that individual, that they're staying where they're supposed to be, whether it be an inclusion zone where they need to be, or whether they have breached by going into something called an exclusion zone where they ought not to be. So the system is a robust built system. So if for some reason there is some difficulty or there is loss of communications via the satellite, the system automatically fails over into something called LBS or location-based system, whereby it will now utilize the SIM technology or the SIM card within the device in order to triangulate and to get that location of the individual. In relation to domestic violence, we actually go now to a third tier or third method of backup if we should lose GPS and LBS. We then move into something called RF or radio frequency. So you have that short burst of information between devices or like devices. So in relation to DV or domestic violence, if there was to be a breach and we would have lost GPS and we would have lost LBS, the devices continue to communicate between each other. And if for some reason there is some alarm or alert which need to be noted, it then communicates through what we call the RF frequency. So that is what you have happening in relation to these devices. And how it would work is that the offender or the monitored person would wear a small device. We have some which need not to be charged in under 2 years, whereby we have which must be charged within what we call a 24-hour cycle for continuity. It is to note that we monitor the life or the battery of these devices on a 24/7 basis. So we can tell each time that the device is plugged in or plugged out, what is the battery charge, what's required of it, so we can in conjunction with the monitored person, inform of such if for some reason they may have forgotten to charge their system. This device will keep track of their location in relation to where they are, and what we do with that information once it's captured on the relevant maps, we can state based on that individual court order, because a court order would state that they either stay within a certain geo zone or geo fence, let's say, for example, a home, or if they are allowed to work, they need to proceed in a certain route. They have a specific time that they need to arrive, a specific time they need to depart. So we ensure that all those requirements and those schedules are in place, and we monitor that that person abide by those particulars.
Mr. Hines?
So basically, it works in relation to the device where it utilizes what we call GPS and cellular technology. That GPS and cellular technology collects what we call compliance data. That compliance data is then checked to ensure that it's keeping with what is the requirements, and we continue to monitor the person on a daily basis. So that is just a basic snippet in relation to monitoring and how the individual and how the system would work once a bracelet or monitoring device has been affixed to that individual.
Now, Mr. Hines, before you continue, I mean, your explanation there has, generated a lot of questions from us too as well. Because, and I mean, thank you very much. That was well done. But one of the interests for me was, and for the benefit of the public. Now, let's say I without wishing, my wife reports me for domestic violence issue. It is determined that I need to wear a bracelet. I am administered one. I've been ordered not to go within 200 meters of her. How does that work if I decide to breach? What would I have, and what would my estranged have in her possession to warn her that I'm in close proximity? And how does that work?
Okay, so thanks very much for that question. And that is one of the main questions that we normally get when we do our sensitization workshops. So you're tapping on what we call domestic violence. All right. So before I answer the question, you must know that if, for example, there is a order issued for an individual, so there is a protection order. If a protection order has already been issued and there is a breach of that protection order, and the person is brought back to the judicial system to answer for that breach, the court may issue, without the consent of the person, an electronic monitoring device. Now, we have to remember that every individual who is to be affixed with a bracelet must first consent to wearing this bracelet. There is one aspect only, and what I have just explained to you, only if there is that protection order issued and there is a breach of that protection order, the judicial officer may sanction the individual to wear a bracelet without their request or their consent. However, in all other instances, there must be consent. So that is the start of it. So if we're going to do the DV and there is a request where we call the protection device, and that is requested based on a breach, or the victim decides that, I am threatened and I would like to be protected against the other party, there is a tree mechanism. The DV is issued under a tree mechanism device. So the offender would be affixed with an ankle bracelet and what we call a receiver, which is like a prototype telephone. So they will have that in their possession. That will be the offender. The victim now will have a like device to the offender receiver, which will speak to each other. The two devices will speak to each other in terms of the technological aspect of it, the software within the devices. So the victim have a receiver. The offender has a bracelet and a receiver. on the system itself, which we call our operational or offender management system, that is where we input all the characteristics, where the person need to be, where the person ought not to be, what are the requirements in terms of the scheduling. So we create what we'll call a geozone or geofence. So for example, let's look at it as your property and you have a fence around your property which is visible. However, this fence, which we call a geozone or geofence, is an invisible fence which is identified through the software and the devices that the person have in their question. Once there is a breach or purported breach, an alarm, because what we do is set parameters and boundaries within that location or that geofence. So you have a buffer zone and you have a exclusion zone. So before you can reach the exclusion zone, there is something called a buffer zone. And to explain that to you, let's take an example. So visualize the Queen's Park Oval. Let's say the Queen's Park Oval is that exclusion zone where the wife or the husband or whoever it is who has the victim, whoever is the victim, is residing, right? So let's use the Queen's Park Oval. So visualize that. So they are not allowed to go within or the proximity of the Queen's Park Oval. However, we would create something called a buffer zone around the Queen's Park Oval. And that buffer zone would outreach approximately 3, 5, 10, it all depends on the risk analysis of the person that we would have taken into account. And we would expand that range or that buffer zone before the individual can reach to the exclusion zone. What that does, it gives us the opportunity, if the person was to come into the buffer zone, to communicate with that individual. Say, okay, listen, you are entering a zone where you ought not to be. What is your intention? They may state that, okay, I am just transversing X to Y, and we will continue monitoring the person through that, and there is no issues. However, if there is an issue, and after the communication with the person, they still proceed towards the exclusion zone, that gives us the opportunity and the time to then enforce something called a police response mechanism, right? So then there is a police response attached to this because the person would have not listened to the operator who would have given him certain instructions or her certain instructions. And within that time, before they can reach to the exclusion zone, that person may be apprehended. So those are the protection mechanisms which we have in relation to the domestic violence. Additionally, once that perpetrator or that monitored person come within a certain vicinity of the victim, the device automatically triggers and tell the victim that the aggressor, so they will see it coming up on their screen, because remember, this is like a prototype telephone. It comes up to the screen and it says aggressor in the vicinity. All right. Likewise, we would also receive that notification on our OMS or our operational management system, which tells us where the person is proceeding to. So it gives the victim time to move, time to go to a safe place while we trigger that police response mechanism in order to apprehend the person who would be en route to the victim's location. So that is reason why we have a device given to the victim, and it works in tandem with the device which is affixed to the monitored person. So should they come within proximity of the victim, the device would trigger. It would warn the victim that the person is coming within proximity. And to note, this proximity, we would normally measure it sometime 800 meters, 1,000 meters. It all depends, I say again, on the risk analysis. So it gives that victim opportune time to move to a more safer place while the police or that police response mechanism is triggered, and we can apprehend the individual or the monitored person en route to the victim. All right, so that is the DV, or the domestic violence, and I hope that would have cleared some of the concepts or some of the questions in relation to how does this thing really work.
Of course, Mr. Hines. Of course,
Yes,
Mr. Hines,
very comprehensive.
you have us jostling for positions here to ask more questions.
Yeah.
But one more from me before Natasha jumps in. You all can speak to the person wearing the device as well. The person can hear you giving them instructions through the device as well.
Right, so wonderful question. So we have two tiers to that. So one, the device utilizes, as I say again, we go back to this, it's like a prototype telephone. So yes, we have voice communication with the victim. We also have voice communication with the monitored person. So we communicate with the individual, and through our SOPs, our standard operating procedure, the operator would then give certain instructions to the monitored person moving in the vicinity of the victim. And should the monitored person refuse to listen to that information, the operator will then, what we call, move that to a different tier, a different level. So it goes now to the supervisor. The supervisor will go through his or her operating procedures. And if they confirm that this is a threat on the victim, then that police response mechanism is triggered. Because remember, as you rightfully say, the person could be transporting between, let's say, Tragreach Road moving into Port of Spain. And we could monitor that movement within the vicinity without having to trigger a police response, because we are monitoring and in communication with the person in question. So yes, not only can we send voice messages, we can also send text messages. So if there is a situation whereby you don't want to have a phone ringing, right, we can send text messages to the person. The victim also has the opportunity to send emergency calls directly to the center if their life is at threat. All right, so it may not be the monitored person who is coming into the vicinity of the victim. It may be someone else. All right, and if that victim so decide or feel that their life is at threat, they can now send an immediate notification via that device to the center, and then we would treat with it based on our standard operating procedures. So yes, communications is had between the center and the device in question that the person have affixed to their person. Now note, this communication or this voice layer of communication is only available through the two-piece device, which the child will have, or the domestic violence, or if the person is on a home curfew, we also have that layer of voice communication. If the individual is placed on what we call a one-piece solution, there is no voice communication on that device. So in the court order, it would be stated that the monitored person must, at their expense, be in possession of a phone, a cellular phone, which we would have constant communication with that individual. Should that person not have that phone at any point in time when we are communicating with them, it constitutes a violation or a breach of their order, and as such, that person can be then brought back before the judicial officer. So there are a number of things that we have in place which is geared for the protection of, one, the victim, and two, the protection of the individual themselves who is on electronic monitoring. And that is the methods which we utilize in order to ensure that everyone is safe and we can communicate with the monitored persons in question.
If you're just joining us, you're listening to Dependency, and we are speaking with Director and Deputy Director of the Electronic Monitoring Unit under the Ministry of National Security, and you're hearing from Mr. Hines. And again, we showed a video in the beginning of how it works. For those of you who joined late, we're going to show it again in a while. But Natasha has some questions.
Yes, quite a few, and thank you very much, Mr. Hines, for that those comprehensive responses. And firstly, I want to go back a little bit to the process of granting the order to affix this device to an individual. In the case of domestic violence, you mentioned that it will be considered only if the traditional protection order has been breached. It will go back to the court, and the court will determine this device will be affixed to you, the person who has breached the order, without your consent. is it at that stage, and who contributes to the decision that is made by the court to which layer or level of the device, whether it's a 1, 2, or 3 three-pronged approach? Who determine? How is that decision brought upon, and does the EMU have any input into that decision?
All right, so first let me clarify for previous statements. So what I tapped on there was consent and non-consent, all right? So anyone can go to the court and request if they're a domestic violence solution, and the court can go through the processes and state whether a device is to be affixed. So that is normal. Anyone can do that. There is no particular pattern. The court would decide whether they have met the requirements, and once they would have met the requirements, they would issue an order, protection order, and the device would be affixed. What I stated prior was if a protection order was already issued, so you would have already gone through the process of a DV, and you would have had what it is, and you had some misunderstanding or some fallout, and the protection order was already issued. At that point, the victim could request and go through with the judicial officers that the judicial officer can now state that I can place you on electronic monitoring without a consent. So there are 2 layers. There's one that everyone who is to be placed on electronic monitoring first must consent, but there is only one layer whereby that consent is not required, and that is if there is a protection order already issued, then that person can be placed on electronic monitoring without their consent. However, all other layers, that consent is required. All right. So in relation to that, so anyone can go, if you have a situation, you go before the courts and identify what your situation is. Once the judicial officers have identified that it would have met the thresholds for electronic monitoring, that would be done. All right. So, but there are a number of other aspects and attributes in relation to not only DV or domestic violence. So there is a process. All right. And the process starts with what we call so let's go all the way back from proclamation of the Administration of Justice Electronic Monitoring Act number 11 of 2012, as amended by Administration of Justice Electronic Monitoring Act number 11 of 2020. So we would have done a number of things in the revision of the Act in order to provide for the effective and safe electronic monitoring. All right. So coming out of that, those of you who may have a order in front of you, an Act in front of you, the 2012 or the amended Act of 2020. So the court has layers of consideration to place someone on electronic monitoring. They can say, okay, so who am I going to impose on this electronic monitoring? It may be as a sentence for an offense committed. All right, so someone may already be incarcerated, they're already behind bars, they come before the judicial officer and they indicate that, okay, can consideration be given to me for an offense, that offense which I am behind bars, which was committed, can I now be looked at for electronic monitoring? And the judicial officer can proceed once there is a consent of the person and we go through the relevant layers. One of those will be something called a director's report, and we'll go more in depth into what constitutes this director's report. All right. So there is also, and that can be found under the Act under Section 10(1)A as a sentence for an offense committed. Now, if you go to Section 10(1)B of the said Act, Administration of Justice Electronic Monitoring Act number 11 of 2012, it can also be in lieu of a sentence of imprisonment. So let's say I am driving down the road, some altercation with a police officer, I'm brought before a judicial officer, and instead of imprisoning me and putting me into prison, right, I can be released directly with electronic monitoring, right, based again on the judicial officer directives. That can happen under that layer. All right. We also have it can also be part of a sentence imposed. So let's say the person was given a 12-month incarceration or 12-month sentence. we can say, the judicial officer can say, okay, 6 months of that will be via electronic monitoring, 6 months of that will be incarcerated. All right. And the one which we have seen most widely used is as a condition of an order for bail. All right. So as a condition, for an order for bail, it can be used as one of those conditions. And just to note that it can also be used under probation offenses. And if for some reason there is what we call a presidential, under a president, an order for electronic monitoring may be imposed by the president as a condition of a pardon also. So there are a number of layers under which an individual can access or request to access electronic monitoring. All right. So those are some of the main particulars under which we have ascribed or have individuals placed on the program. And it is noteworthy that not only do we have a number of Trinidad and Tobago nationals on the program, but we also have quite a few non-nationals who have also been placed on the program. All right. So once the court, in their discretion, consider that the person would have met the threshold for electronic monitoring, they ask of the unit to provide them with something called this director's report for additional information in terms of the suitability of the person. And we work in conjunction with our stakeholder, one of which is the probation department. And they also provide us with something called a psychosocial assessment of the individual who is requesting to be placed on this electronic monitoring. So with those documents, we have a medical form that the person must declare the medical status. We have a means test that the person must declare possible income, or if anyone would be, has the ability to, one, not only pay for the device, but to support the person based on the type of device that they may be placed on. And so these are a number of things within the director's report. So if we look at legal notice number 325, which is the court rules, to the end of those court rules, there are a number of documents attached, which are draft documents to which, if someone would want to vary their sentence or their time on electronic monitoring, or to have electronic monitoring removed from their person, there is that sample form which they need to fill to send back to the judiciary. If we look under legal notice number 326, that is the regulations. And to the end of those regulations, there are two very important forms. One, there is a protection device form, which is filled out by the victim if they request an electronic monitoring to start the DV or domestic violence solution process. And the form 1, which what we call the owner or occupier of the proposed residence to where the monitored person is to reside. So we have what we call, that form is called permission to install and maintain electronic monitoring equipment. So we must first have the consent of the owner occupier of the residence to which the monitored person is so to reside. And once we have that approval, we then continue with the additional documents, which is approval or application for EM, which is an internal form. And the individual must state that they must abide by all the different rules and regulations of the program, sign that, and that package, that entire package, comprise the director's report. So you have Form 1, Form 2, and let me give you the names as I go through. So Form 1, you have permission to install. Form 2, if it's applicable, you have the protection device for the victim. Form 3, you have an application for EM. Form 4, you have a means test. Form 5, you have, if it's a juvenile, the parent or person with responsibility for the child, parent, guardian, or person with responsibility for the child must fill out this form. They must have it authenticated and signed by a justice of the peace. and stating that they are the person who do have control with the child or over the child. And that is also attached to the package, the package of documents. And you also have a Form 6, which is the medical form. Form 7 is an exit form, etc., etc. So that package is then compiled together with this psychosocial assessment coming from the probations department. And based on our findings of the location or the home where the person is to reside, we then state, okay, this is what we recommend. And based on that recommendation, we also look at the risk analysis based on the antecedents of the individual. And we can say, okay, we recommend either a 1-piece, a 2-piece, or a 3-piece, or well, 1-piece, 2-piece, or home curfew. That document is then forwarded to the court for their input in terms of they can now state, yes, I'm going to accept this recommendation, or they can choose not to. All right. So this director's report is an aid to the judicial officer in determining the suitability of the person for electronic monitoring. All we do is gather the facts involving or surrounding around the individual and relay that to the judicial officer via this director's report, and the judicial officer make the determination whether that individual would be placed on electronic monitoring. I know it was quite a mouthful, but I hope that it brought some clarity.
Yes, you know, kind of, there's a big nutshell, you put it in there, but let's, before we can, because, you know, time flies on this program very fast, and we'll want to show that if you're just joining us, folks, you're listening to Dependency. Mr. Hamilton, I'm sure he's still with us, who's the director of the Electronic Monitoring Unit, and you're hearing from his deputy right now, Mr. Lawrence Hines. Chopin, let's take a break, and when we return, we will just touch on that short video again to show how it works, and then we come back to wrap up with the other questions we have here. All right, so folks, stay right there, and remember, if you want to see how this device works, you join us on Facebook or YouTube. We'll be back. Stay right there.
My Freedom Day. We shouldn't have to live in fear. You should be free. I should be free. We all should be free.
CNN's My Freedom Day project. This year we are working with many organizations, schools and groups across the Caribbean region on raising awareness about this modern day slavery of human trafficking. And we are joining and partnering on the My Freedom Day pledge and projects on sharing creative ways on how we can raise awareness about human trafficking and how we can work together to end this crime.
Finally, Welcome Relief comes in the form of a scientific-based program that shows us how to manage through the tough, current challenges. Called Habitalism. It features best-selling author on positivity and happiness, Dr. Tal Ben-Shahar, integrated with the award-winning Intangence methodology of Ross. Visit habitalism.me to register now for this free life-transforming program endorsed by the United Nations established University for Peace. Gifted by Guardian Group. Live easy.
Right, so we're back, and what we're hearing here now again. So a perpetrator, so he's leaving prison, he signs for a monitor, and he ends up home. He puts on the bracelet is put on for him, I would suspect, and right, and the monitor is placed in his room, the device is placed in his room, and it's engaged. Once it's engaged, now you go back to our command center we're seeing here, and the command center now can tell where this person is. the person walking out their door, walking out the yard, and they're heading to who knows where. An alarm is sounded. It seems as though the person has breached the perimeter of his assigned, designation. His assigned zone. Yes, and but the good thing about it is that the command center can actually follow him wherever he goes, and what happens next ended up and he's apprehended. So this is how the device works, and we have the director and deputy director on with us this morning. Gentlemen, how will the electronic monitoring unit work with other agencies in the criminal justice and penal system? So we urge if we could keep the answers short so that we can get through all of them, and we may have one or two questions that we could take from the audience. All right, so let's go with this one. How will the electronic monitoring unit work with other agencies in the criminal justice and penal system?
All right, so how the system would work with other means or other levels. We have a high layer of collaboration with our key stakeholders in the criminal justice system, and we ensure that we have that communication and participation with individuals. So I know you would have heard the coin phrase whole of government. All right, we literally live whole of government, whereby based on these stakeholders, we have that collaboration and participation with the entities in relation to not only making electronic monitoring more stronger, but ensuring that we have the full participation among like agencies, whereby it would relate to electronic monitoring. And to just give you a quick synopsis of some of these agencies, we have the Judiciary of Trinidad and Tobago, we have the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, we have the Prison Service, we have the AG's office, we have the Probation Services Division. We are forming ties now with other entities, for example, Port Authority of Trinidad and Tobago. You may ask why Port Authority, but there are some what we call under security tenant, why we have now enforced that. Training departments under the University of the West Indies, all right, in terms of a training criteria or element, and other areas within government. So we literally live a whole of government approach in relation to where electronic monitoring would lash or touch in relation to ensuring that we have that collaboration and communication among entities. Yes.
Now, Mr. Hines, before I hand you to Natasha, is it possible at the end of the program, because we have some very pertinent questions popping up on Facebook especially, and is it possible that you could probably spend some time and to just satisfy the curiosity of these folks asking these questions by just responding to them? Is that possible? Because for us to ask all of these questions... Pardon?
Sure. Once time prevails, we will answer as much questions as possible. As we say, the focus and the onus of this program, this sensitization, is to bring to the general public the information and to remove any sort of misinformation or misunderstanding of electronic monitoring. So once you can hear it from the department, you know that this is authenticated and this is the true means, this is exactly what it is happening in relation to electronic monitoring. So we will try our utmost best to answer as much questions as possible in relation to any questions in that of EM, electronic monitoring.
Yes, thank you.
All right, so you mentioned a number of agencies a while ago that the EMU is collaborating with. Have you been able to identify any successes or benefits to these specific collaborations?
On a daily basis, there is benefits and there is success. So just mere our continued collaboration with the judiciary, that is how we have individuals or monitored persons brought onto the program. If we did not collaborate, then there could have been some untoward effect. All right, so that is intrinsically important. In relation to the TTPS, not only do we collaborate with the TTPS, but we in our monitoring center have police officers embedded in the center. So they work alongside us here in the center. And that is based on the collaborative nature of what we do, ensuring that we aim and provide for each other in a timely basis to do what? To protect the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago by ensuring that we have a quick, robust, and effective police response mechanism. Hence, we have police officers embedded in the system working alongside our personnel to ensure that we have that quick response. In relation to the prisons, we ensure that we have that collaborative effect again, and that would relate to ensure that we have the seamless and timely movement of persons should they have to be placed on electronic monitoring. So when they need to transfer or to move out of incarceration, to ensure that there is no hiccups or there is no untimely delays or whatever it is. And that also dovetails into other agencies. For example, if we have a non-national who is incarcerated, there is a high possibility that there may be what we call a deportation order for that person. And if they were to be released, if they were to be granted bail, it means to say that the immigration department, the first place they will pick them up and carry them towards IDC. But based on that collaborative relationship and working arrangement, again, what you have happening is that we would ask for a stay on that deportation order in order to ensure that we have the effective fitting of the individual with electronic monitoring device. So you have this seamless movement from order being issued by the judicial officer to that document going to the prisons, identifying that the person upon accessing bail, right? Because remember, the person have to access bail. Once they access bail, they can have a now seamless transfer to the program of electronic monitoring as opposed to being detained and carried towards the IDC if they were to access bail otherwise. So those are just some of the collaborative mechanisms that we enforce and that we utilize. And we continue to see the benefits too. What it does, it makes our job easier, and not only our job, but that of the other stakeholder easier in knowing what is required in relation to this whole electronic monitoring process. Yes?
Yes, sir. No, someone, and I think this is a real pertinent question we should ask, right? No, the device is ankle, which means, but for some, you mentioned child. Now, would this device be visible, and the person is thinking in the case of minors using and attending school? How do we work that out?
All right. So again, collaboration and communication with stakeholders. So the department, the children's authority, not children's authority, but under the judiciary, the child, they took a serious concern in relation to what I would call
Children's Court.
The Children's Court. All right, they took a serious consideration in relation to what we would say are the dynamics of the device in terms of form and factor. So basically size and look and these different things. So we actually had to go back out and ensure that we had something which would not stigmatize the child in terms of wearing of such a device. All right. So the device which will be worn by the child is that of the form factor is something like what we call those, those sport watch that you will wear if you're going around the savannah to check your heartbeat and whatever. So that is widely used, it's widely seen.
Okay.
And it's something similar to that which is placed on the child's ankle in conjunction with a receiver which is fitted in a nice little pouch, and it can be placed in the pocket, the child's pocket, or on their belt or something like that. So it's concealed. All right. So in terms of that stigmatization of the child in relation to wearing an ankle monitoring device, it is not as visible as one will perceive. All right, because the child could simply say, well, this is one of my heart monitors or track monitors based on some sort of athletic regime the child may be going through, something like that. So we looked at that as opposed to some of the other devices which are to be worn, which are highly visible And once person look at it, they can see, well, hey, it's something untoward with this device. But the ones for the child, it's sleek and very, very
discreet,
useful in terms of the design and form factor to ensure that there isn't that layer of stigmatization on the child who may have to wear such. Please.
All right.
Before we go to the next question, I just wanted to, if you could briefly elaborate on the conditions under which a child, a minor, a juvenile would need to be fitted with one of these devices.
All right. So clearly, once it deals with a child, it's an entire different philosophy. All right. So first to begin, we start with the children's court. All right, where there would be certain requirements which would have to be adhered to in relation to from the order being issued to the child being fitted, whereby we was a child, it have to be in a particular place. All right. If for some reason the child was to offend, we have to communicate with the child protection unit of the police in order to apprehend or to bring that child back to the judicial system. So there is a separate category in relation to treatment of the child. Because it's a child, we cannot treat them as an adult. So there is a whole layer which we now have to undertake in relation to the treatment of the child. And that is enforced. And again, I go back to what we call our operational management system or offender management system. All those identifiers are placed in the system. So once something untoward occurs, the operator knows exactly what is required in terms of the movement and ensuring that those are carried out once a child is involved. The child is not treated as an adult, and as a result of that, there are certain protocols and criteria which must be adhered to in relation to the protection of the child. Please.
That's
that suffice. That will suffice.
And before, just know, I have one more train before we get quickly. I don't want to add anything to your plate or give anybody ideas, but there was recently the judiciary give the all clear so that people who even charged for murder can get bail. Would your unit be called to respond to this as well, or be part of this?
All right. So quite interestingly, so we at this unit, we speak about looking beyond the horizon. All right. So as you indicated in your preamble to the start of this program, we are a unit in its infancy stage, and we are a young unit within the Ministry of National Security. But we looked at the possible measures and effect and reach that electronic monitoring would have. So the first thing we did, remember I indicated there are two acts. There is the Administration of Justice Electronic Monitoring Act number 11 of 2012, and as amended, Administration of Justice Electronic Monitoring Act number 11 of 2020. Now, in the first act, I could have stated categorically to you that murder would not have applied because it falls under what? Schedule 1. Right? So if you go into the first act, it stated that persons who are entitled to be electronically monitored must not fall under Schedule 1 offenses. And Schedule 1 offenses, there are 5 basic offenses, starting from murder, going to attempted murder, kidnapping, firearms, all these different things, right? So based on our collaboration effect and our discourse and discussions with our stakeholders, primarily the TTPS and others who I would have identified earlier, they indicated that should we not think about the possibility of including Schedule 1 offenses in as a condition of bail for any offense under Schedule 1. So that was considered, and as a result of that, what we did was amend the Act coming out of Act 11 of 2020, whereby offenses under Schedule 1 can now be considered for electronic monitoring as a condition of bail. Now, that is Part A. There is a Part B to that. Inasmuch as we started this program as again, we are in the infancy stage. We started with some 300 devices. We are moving April of this year would make it 1 year since the first device was affixed to an individual. So we would have to do something called an evaluation of the system upon, rightfully so, within, let's say, approximately 3 years, would give us that opportune time to make a statement on electronic monitoring, whether it meet the need of Trinidad and Tobago, and should we continue or expand as the case would be. So in the first instance, we look at what we will call the low-hanging fruit, all right? The low-hanging fruit. And as a result of that, we acquire devices to treat with the low-hanging fruit. So whereby we would have looked beyond the horizon and stated that, okay, we can now place in the future persons on Schedule 1 offenses, right? It means to say that after such an evaluation over a period of time to which we have not reached as yet, we can then have these individuals brought onto the program with the acquisition of additional like devices for what we will call high priority monitored persons, right? So we haven't got the high priority devices as yet. We have engaged our provider to provide such. Procurement at this point in time takes some time, but we are looking at the acquisition of such devices. But as it stands now, today, we are not in possession of the high priority devices for persons on Schedule 1 at that layer. Remember that when we amended the Act, under the Bail Act, murder was still not applicable, right? So although you have the other layers of Schedule 1, attempted murder, trafficking, and etc., but bail was still under the Bail Act, which stated that it was not applicable, right? So we knew that at some point in time in the future that it would come, and we are prepared for it. The system is built for it. It so happened that we, in terms of moving forward, we have to acquire additional devices in order to cater for the high priority personnel who would be placed on the program. So I hope that this would have brought some clarity to your question.
Yes, it did.
So moving on to another question regarding the penalties for breach or tampering with the device. Could you tell us about that?
All right. So Mr. Hamilton, you want to jump in here on the penalties?
No, Mr. Hines, you go ahead. I like how it's flowing.
Yes,
you can go ahead.
All right. So an individual who deliberately tampers with or remove a device commits an offense, right? So you interfere with the device, you try to move the device, whatever sort of tamper, and is liable upon summary conviction to a fine of $100,000 and to imprisonment of 2 years. And you'll find that in the Act under Section 17(1) of the Act of 11 of 2012. All right. So it is to note that this is in conjunction or in addition to whatever charge you may be on currently. So electronic monitoring now, if you should tamper, it attracts a fine of up to $100,000, and you can have a summary conviction, imprisonment of up to an additional 2 years on your existing sentence. So if you have been brought onto the program and you had 6 months to complete, and that will be the end of your sentence, and for some reason you went and you tamper with the device, you can add or have added to your sentence and up to additional 2 years as a result of such a tamper. So we also have, if somebody was to knowingly give false information to the system or to the personnel of the system, you can be held liable to up to $100,000 as a fine and imprisonment again of up to 2 years, and you can find that under Section 23(2) of the Act. All right, and also a person who attempts to duplicate an electronic monitoring device is liable upon, again, summary conviction to a fine of $25,000. Sorry, $25,000 and imprisonment for up to 1 year. We also have legal notice 326, which is the regulations, all right? And if there is a contravention of those regulations, it can attract a fine of up to $50,000. Right? So there are a number of penalties to which, if someone was to breach, which they can be held accountable to once brought before the judicial officer to answer for such a breach. I hope
And
that
of
answered
course,
or bring some clarity to your opinion.
yes, and of course the monitored persons will be apprised of these penalties, and clearly so, because I'm sure that for many people, understanding the perimeters of what the device will allow them to do and to places to go might be a challenge. I'm seeing that as a challenge.
So what we do is that once that individual has been successful in electronic monitoring, and they have successfully acquired their bail and the device is to be affixed to the individual, we do something called an orientation of the individual being brought onto the program.
Right.
Within that orientation, all of this is explained to the individual at a second layer. When I say a second layer, this is the second time or third time this information will be brought to the attention of the person. So during the hearing for the individual, the information is passed, or layers of that information is passed to the proposed monitored person, and their attorney also provide them with this information, because there are documents in terms of forms which the person must sign off on, indicating that I am aware of my requirements to the program. I am also aware if I was to breach any one of the tenets of the program, this is what I am to be held accountable to. So the person is very much aware what their requirements are once they are placed on electronic monitoring. We don't take it for granted. Please.
All right. So, folks, if you're just joining us, we close to wrap it up with the director and deputy director of the electronic monitoring unit, and they've been Mr. Hamilton and Mr. Hines. They've been very comprehensive in explaining, and I hope you are, learning a lot from what you're hearing from Mr. Hines, especially.
And hopefully we'll have time to take some of your calls towards the end.
Yes, Mr. Hamilton spoke with us, and he's still with us, and we coming to the end of our questions, but we must find. Do you have the staff, gentlemen? Are you fully equipped, or you have to recruit more people? Because this is a lot of work here. You all have a lot of work on your hands here.
All right. So as with any unit or any division, any department within the government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, I guess you would hear the notation that I require more staff. To this, we have had intense discourse with our superiors, and of the 28th of February, we closed off recruitment for additional officers and personnel to be absorbed or to be recruited into the electronic monitoring department. So we would have placed a number of advertisements within the general public that came to a close on the 28th of February, and our human resource department is currently assessing and shortlisting individuals or additional or new personnel who would be brought onto the system. So as a work in progress, we look at our deficiencies and we look to correct those deficiencies through the relevant channels. So yes, we are expecting new personnel within the not too distant future.
Now, Mr. Hamilton, as director of this unit, what impact is expected from the implementation of this system overall? What do we expect, or what can we expect from the EMU?
Well, as we stated before, we expect a complete overhaul to contribute to an overhaul of the criminal justice system by introducing these new sentencing options, as Mr. Hines will have explained so articulately. A reduced prison population will assist not only the prison but the society as a whole. We expect to have enhanced management of the domestic violence matters by allowing persons who are brought before the courts for domestic violence to be monitored on a continuous basis, and that should contribute to a reduction in the serious impacts that we experience now in domestic violence. We spoke earlier about the whole issue of the restorative justice element. That is another benefit of the system. And so those are basically what we would have hoped to contribute to. And as we say, we are new, and we are confident that we're going to achieve the goals and objectives that we've set out. I just wanted to mention one matter here concerning the issue of fines and for breaches of the system. And I wanted to say that every employee of the EMU, whether permanent or contract, or a person under consultancy, or any individual engaged by a service provider, shall swear or take an oath of secrecy and any disclosure of information, confidential information. So I wanted to raise the issue of confidentiality of the information that we gather and that we possess. Any disclosure of information is liable on summary conviction to a fine of $100,000 and imprisonment of 2 years. And this is contained in Section 7 of the Act number 11 of 2020. And that includes the director and the deputy director as well. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that, Mr. Hamilton. I just something just occurred to me. Is the implementation of such a device on an individual, does that form part of a criminal record per se, as would a term, a sentence in prison?
If it forms part of the criminal record?
A person's criminal record, yeah.
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Yes, it does.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you very much for
and
that.
Is there a time frame? I'm not sure if Mr. Hines mentioned this, but is there a maximum and or minimum time frame for the device to be affixed?
Or it depends on the
court order.
The device or maximum time frame? No. It really depends on the individual, the applicant,
and the
sourcing the required bail amount and so on. And and that really depends. So there's no time limit. So we have persons who are waiting for some time now, are waiting to be affixed because not because of our fault, but because they may not be able to attract to achieve the bail requirements.
Right.
Right. So if you're just joining us, folks,
I think that is the question, right?
Yes.
If you're just joining us, you listen to Dependency, and we're speaking with the director and deputy director of the Electronic Monitoring Unit. If you have any questions, or a comment, you could call us. We just have a few minutes to take some calls at 622-3937. And Mr. Hines, somebody was asking here, what about in a noisy environment? Let's say the person wants to play mass, and that's the victim who has a device now. Or is it that once you are fitted with these devices, there are certain recreational activities you cannot take part in? So let's say the person in a carnival band and decide to play carnival, play mass, and and that device the alarm goes off, in a band or in a fete, all of these things you may not be able to hear it. How are we working this one out?
Well, if you are so fortunate to be allowed to be within a band and have that festive time, and based on the type of device that may be affixed to your person, if it's a one piece, the alarm also goes with a vibration on the person. So apart from an audible tone, there is also a vibration on the person, alerting that individual to the alert tone in order for them to treat with whatever is happening with the device. Based on other factors or other measures, layers of the equipment, if, for example, the person has a two-piece and the transmitter affixed to the person will not vibrate, but they will get the audible messages.
I think we
may
Mr.
have
Hines
lost.
dropped off a bit there.
Lost the connection with them.
Yeah, but look, this has been an interesting discussion. It's something new to Trinidad and Tobago, the electronic monitoring unit.
Mm-hmm.
Let's take a call at 622-3937. Hello, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. and Mrs.
Morning.
Excellent program. And you see, we need to deal with the reality. As the society become more sophisticated and more developed, we also have to introduce mechanisms to deal with certain things that was not there or is archaic, So I think this is a very good move. But what I wanted to know, since it's electronic and electricity and water are not friends, what would be the effect if you decide to soak your foot in water or wherever? How does the electricity and that how it would, one would impact on the other, because it's electronic, right? So that's it. So Natasha and Garth, will you keep up the good work? God bless both of you. Bye.
Thank you.
All right. I think, Yvonne, the devices are made to take water because, of course, people have to bathe, right? So they are designed to be water resistant or waterproof.
Hello, good morning.
Hello, yes, good morning.
Good morning.
Yes. Am I on air to make a contribution?
Yes, you are.
Yes, what I would like to find out, what effect, if showing offenders who are going to be attached with this device, a video of how they are being monitored and how, if they breach going to certain places or beyond their limits, they can be caught. What effect that could have on such persons, not only being informed about it verbally, but actually seeing it visually? Is that going to help minimize the amount of problems for those persons who have those devices, or is it just that they don't care? After seeing a video and knowing, well, look, I can be caught, so I'll have to, fall in line and behave myself.
All right.
So I just want to know what effect that would have on them if they were to see visually a video on this before they are released.
Okay. Mr. Hines, you heard that, Mr. Hamilton? Any one of you could take that question? Caller was saying, what about showing them?
So we were logged off a short while. Could you repeat the question, please?
Yes. No. The caller was saying that if the person intended the monitored person, if they will be shown a video of how this works and how the device works and what is expected of them, so that when they administer the device, they will know exactly what they can and cannot do when they see how the device works.
All right, so yes, the monitored person, they are not shown a video, but they are given a physical orientation where all the facets or all the aspects of the device is explained to the individual, and all the requirements and onus of the individual is explained to them during that orientation session. So that normally lasts within an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes, just explaining the individual the requirements of wearing the device, the do's and don'ts of the device, the safety element of the device, and all those aspects are explained during the orientation session before the device is affixed to the individual, and they are also given a document. All right, and that document states everything which would have been explained via the orientation. So if they would have missed it or missed any aspect, they can refer to that document. Additionally, we give them an open ear 24/7 to the center should they have any questions, which that question can be clarified based on their understanding. Please.
622-3937. Good morning.
Yes, good morning.
Morning.
Question. Who is going to defer the cost? The recipient of that electrical monitoring bracelet going to be required to pay part of that cost? Is it going to end up more costly than sending people to prison?
Yes,
Thank you for
the
that.
cost. Yes, I think in the video, Mr. Hines explained the cost, but Mr. Hines, caller wants to know the cost of And if the individual has to pay for it, could you run through that with us quickly?
All right, so based on our act, yes, the person is required to pay for it. However, the court may decide based on the financial capability or capacity of the person that they may defer such a cost. However, if the person have to pay for the device, normally we have starting from the victim unit. So the victim, normally charge the victim for use of the device, but just for what we call accounting purposes, the cost of the victim unit is $8 a day. But we don't normally ask the victim to pay that cost. If the individual is placed on a one piece, the cost is $9 per day multiplied by the time on the program. So if it's 1 month, it will be $200+ because 9 by 30 or 31 as the case would be. If it's a 3 months, if it's a 1 year, right, we just multiply it by the time on the program. If the person have to wear a 2-piece or a DV, the cost for that is $10 per day. And if the individual is being affixed with what we call a home curfew solution, the cost of that device is $11 a day. And these costs are taken into consideration via, one, the director's report, through the access of the means test, which would state that either the individual in themselves or there is some party who is close to the individual who will be monitored or requesting to be monitored can pay for such a device. That is also reflected in the order of the court, which would state that payment will be reflected by X party for X duration once they are placed upon the program. Hope that cleared that question, please.
Wow, yeah, it does.
All right. I think we have time for one more call, 1 or 2 more calls.
622-3937. If you wish, you can get a call in. But Mr. Hamilton, we can give you the closing remarks.
To wrap up, yeah.
We have any closing remarks? You give you that opportunity. We have major news coming up at 12. So over to you.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. Quickly, with respect to the cost, I just wanted to add as well that we did a comparative cost analysis of having a person in prison and as again having someone on electronic monitoring, and it was the cost of imprisonment, and the last figure we had was $618 a day, as opposed to the cost that Mr. Hines was speaking about just now. So it is way below the cost comparatively. But on behalf of the Electronic Monitoring Unit, I want to thank you all, first of all, for having us and for giving us the opportunity to spend the last 2 hours with you. We know that the essence of the questions and so on and the interest in the program relates to how the program is being operated and so on, and how the devices operate. And so this is what normally happens. That is the crux of the program. I want to thank also the staff of the Electronic Monitoring Unit who, despite all the restrictions and so on with respect to COVID-19 and we have had our issues as well. I want to thank the hard-working staff of all of the staff of the Electronic Monitoring Unit for going the extra mile and putting in extra effort to achieve success in the program, and we have claimed success so far. So basically, we want to thank the police officers who are assigned. We want to thank especially also the probation officer, the Probation Services Division, who's given us extreme support in this program. And we want to say that we hope to continue on the road that we are going, which is, in terms of the impacts, the positive impacts that we have discussed of the program. So that is my closing remarks. I don't know if Mr. Hines has any, but that's fine. Thank you very much.
Right, Mr. Hines, before your closing remarks quickly, but the device is waterproof, right? That's something you can shower with it.
Yes, it is. Correct. The devices are water resistant, and so you have a time frame on there, so up to half an hour based on the type of device, you can be submerged in up to 15 feet, 1.5 meters of water. You can have your showers as normal. That is no issues. The devices are waterproof in respect to having them placed on an individual.
Great.
All right. Well, thank
Closing
you
remarks?
both.
Well, I would just simply want to say thank you very much for having us. Mr. Hamilton articulated very eloquently the status and the remarks of the EMU in itself. But to you and your listeners, we would like to say thank you very much for getting the information. And I hope that we were able to allay any misinformation which may be out there in relation to electronic monitoring. You would have now gotten the exact or the precise information as to what we do, how we do it, why we do it, and when we do it. So thank you very much again on behalf of yourself and your co-hosts and all of your supporters in terms of your listeners to the program this morning. Thank you very much.
You're welcome, gentlemen, and have a good day. All the best to you and the Electronic Monitoring Unit. Keep good. God bless. Stay safe.
Thank you very much, and we hope you enjoyed our show this morning. Stay tuned for the major news at noon, coming up at 12 noon.
Yes, and followed by Take Two with Roger Lee and Mr. Dominic Calipasad. Gary Bryington, thank you very much. Shortman, thank you very much, folks. Have a great week.
Good
Take
afternoon.
Care. Bye-bye.
Ion Dependency with Garth and Natasha.
Reality radio, at its best, where every life is a biography.
Sundays at 10 a.m. and exclusively on I-95.5 FM.
And streamed live on the Ion Dependency Facebook page.